So, hi everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to our second session today. We have Nicola as a guest. We're really happy he's dedicating his time for this session. And I will just start with our welcome slide. And just sorry, let me have to go to the next slide. Sorry. Okay, so I'm not sharing, right?
You share your screen.
We see you. Welcome.
Welcome. That's
okay,
good.
so so let me see.
It's only
don't know
can
what-
get better. So
Yeah, it's just not going to the next slide for whatever reason. Interesting. It's kind of
otherwise, do it on only on the voice. So
yeah. Sorry, for some reason it's not working. But well, anyways, welcome everyone to our second session. Again, Catherine and me are one of the organizers, and I just want to remind you that if you want to present a session in the future, just get in touch with us. Even if you're a first-time speaker, we can kind of help you to prepare everything and give you feedback so that you can present for the first time. And yeah, that's basically it. Also, thanks you to our sponsors. Unfortunately, my presentation is not working, so I can't share the slides. But so far, our sponsors are Bird and Drive, and we hope that we find further sponsors so that we can continue creating all this fabulous merchandising that we have. Okay, so I would say, Nicola, then the stage is yours, and we are really excited about your topic today.
Thank you very much. I'm also excited, and thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you today and your audience. And yeah, I try to share some tips for passing DP-600 exam. So welcome also from my side. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Whenever I do these virtual sessions, you never know from which parts of the planet people are joining. So it's always better to start with wishing everyone's the part of the day to have a nice part of the day where they are currently located. And with that being said, let's jump into the action, because we have a lot of things to cover, because DP-600 is a very broad exam. Just a brief introduction about myself. My name is Nicola. I'm originally from Belgrade in Serbia, but for last almost 9 years, I live in wonderful city of Salzburg in Austria, where I work as an independent data platform consultant and trainer. And living in Salzburg was the reason why I've chosen this nickname Data Mozart, because you probably know that Salzburg is a birthplace of this great composer. So I was brave enough to use his last name as part of my nickname. And that's why I'm trying to make some music from the data. You can find me on web. I'm blogging at data-mozart.com. I'm also active on social media, so feel free to connect if you like. Other than that, I'm currently writing a book together with my friend Ben Weissman for O'Reilly, Fundamentals of Microsoft Fabric. Early release is already up and running, so you can access it online, and we hope to have the full book in print edition finished beginning next year. So what's on our agenda today? First, I'll try to explain what is DP-600 at all, for all of you who maybe never heard or didn't dive deeper into this exam. What are the skills measured? With some disclaimers here and there, you will see why. Core concepts and features to learn to get you ready for DP-600 exam. I also share some learning resources that I believe are of good quality to get you ready for passing the exam. And of course, we will have some time to answer your possible questions. And when it comes to questions, please feel free. I'll try to monitor the comment section here. So if you have any burning questions that cannot wait for the end of the session, please drop them in the chat window, and I'll try to get back to those questions as soon as possible. Okay, so the date that you see on your screen is super important for all DP-600 exam takers. Why? Because Microsoft decided to update the exam. That's not that's not a big news in general, because usually those updates to exams are some cosmetic things, some minor changes, and so on. But this time, when it comes to DP-600, this is really a serious change. We'll examine by the end of this session what are the changes that will be applied starting from November 15, 2024. So if you plan to take the exam in next 16 days, 2 weeks, let's say, then the content of today's session is 100% relevant to you. If you plan to take the exam after November 15th, you are still good to go. So like 70% of the things that we are going to cover today are still included in DP-600 after this date, but there are some new things that were introduced that I will briefly mention throughout the session. So there is, as I said, exam update happening in 2 weeks. So what is DP-600? Yeah, I'll share the presentation with Catherine and Marisol afterwards, so you can go and read on your own. Basically, that is the certification that Microsoft introduced a year ago, and this one is relevant for everyone who works in the area of bringing and analyzing data with Microsoft Fabric. So this one combines knowledge of former BI engineers or BI developers that are now called analytics engineers. So the official name of this certification is Fabric Analytics Engineer. You need to take just one exam, just one. You will see that it's not just, but yeah, it's one exam. And once you pass this exam, you get 700 or more points out of 1,000. You get the certificate. So there are certain exams, or there were certain exams that certain certificates that required you to pass more than one exam. This is not the case with DP-600. So it's one exam and you get a certificate. Candidate profile. So what skills and what knowledge you need to have, or would be good to have, in order to be able to successfully complete the exam. So those are the responsibilities that are expected from someone who is taking the role of analytics engineer. I would say this is not strictly relevant to Fabric, but generally speaking about analytics engineers. But when it comes to specific knowledge in the era of Fabric, this is the list of skills that you should have, or you should be ready to prove during the exam. So it's advanced Power BI skills. There is no data visualization at all. So it's all about building efficient and scalable semantic models in Power BI. That means because advanced Power BI skills are required, you also need to know Power Query, or to be more specific, you need to know M language that is used for transforming data in Power Query, and also Desc for manipulating the data in the backend part of the Fabric platform. You need to know T-SQL and PySpark. At least in the next 2 weeks, you need to know those two. And of course, you need to know some general principles when it comes to data modeling. So things like dimensional modeling, building a star schema, and so on. We're going to discuss this throughout the session, but just be ready also not to have a pure language understanding of those that I mentioned previously, MDEX, T-SQL, and PySpark, but also to have this knowledge and experience with broader concepts that are relevant for analytics engineering. When it comes to organizational role collaboration and how Fabric Analytics Engineer compares or collaborates with other roles or other personas within the organization. So this one is in the middle, I would say, and analytics engineer needs to have at least basic understanding of various components of data platform. So the fact that you are going to work with, I don't know, Lakehouse and building semantic model on top of it doesn't necessarily mean that you will not cross your paths with data scientists or AI engineers. So it's good to have at least some basic understanding also about those roles and what those roles, what is their purpose within the organization. So let's go through the skills that are measured as of today in DP-600 exam. First, it's planning, implementing, and managing solution for data analytics. This one is the smallest one, so it's 10 to 15%. This one will increase after 15th of November, but as of today, it's the smallest part of the exam. Then the biggest one, the biggest portion of the exam is preparing and serving the data. So it's almost half of the exam, 40 to 45%. Then we have implement and manage semantic models. This one is the only one that stays completely unchanged after November 15th in terms of percentage and in terms of naming and topics that are included in that one. And we have explore and analyze data, which is also 20 to 25% today, but it will be completely removed, or let's say it will be incorporated within this part of preparing data in Microsoft Fabric. So as of today, these are 4 main skills areas that you're going to be tested on. I didn't lie when I told you that DP-600 is really a beast of the exam, because there are in total 57 skills measured. So if you go to the skills measured official page and study guide on Microsoft Learn, you will see that there are 57 bullet points. So 57 different skills are measured within DP-600 exam. This will be reduced after 15th of November to 39. But we will discuss later if this means that it's easier to pass DP-600 or not. As of today and in the next 2 weeks, there are 57 skills that are measured throughout the exam. And what we are going to cover today, we are going to talk about 4 main components in Microsoft Fabric: data engineering, Power BI, data warehouse, and data factory. If you worked with Microsoft Fabric, or if you watched any of presentations that cover Microsoft Fabric in general, you probably noticed that there are additional components in Microsoft Fabric that are not included in this session. The reason is simple, because you will not be tested in DP-600 on those topics. So things like data science, real-time analytics, at least as of today. So those are the data activator and so on. So those are the things that you don't need to know to pass DP-600 exam. Therefore, they are not part of this session. And talking about that, since I already mentioned how those skills are breaking down in terms of percentages, we are going to cover 3 main topics, 3 main skill areas in this session: prepare and serve data, implement and manage semantic models, and explore and analyze data. Those 3 in total add up to like 85 to 90% of the questions that you will get in DP-600 exam. So let's start with some core concepts and features to understand. Just a brief introduction from a high-level perspective about Microsoft Fabric. And I'm usually using analogy to football team to describe that Microsoft Fabric is a football team, and then in that team you have different players with different characteristics, and based on their characteristics you put them into the position where they can excel. So in a football team you have a goalkeeper, you have a defender, forward, midfield player, and so on. So this is the similar thing in Microsoft Fabric. And talking about that, one lake is our focal point of our team. Think of it as a captain, and one lake is basically the central storage location for all the data within your Microsoft Fabric tenant. There is only one lake within Fabric tenants. They can't be more than one. And then you have different players on top of one lake. Data factory, data engineering, those are different experiences that exist in Microsoft Fabric. As I said, 4 of them, I need to update this slide. Real-time analytics is now a separate experience, so it's not part of Synapse experience anymore. Apologies about that, but that doesn't change the overall idea of not having to learn data science, real-time analytics, and data activator as of today. Again, after November 15, things will be slightly changed. So let's start with by talking about how to prepare and serve the data in Microsoft Fabric. First of all, so I'm covering just the concepts and principles and features that you need to know in order to be able to successfully pass the exam. Maybe some of you know certain things, but yeah, doesn't hurt to remind ourselves. So first of all is you will be tested on how to do a proper ETL process within Fabric. So when we talk about ETL, we are talking about extracting, transforming, and loading data. Nowadays, it can be done in multiple different ways. So it's not just ETL, it can be ELT, or there are certain variations between these 3 letters, or if you do transformation before you load the data, or you do the opposite, and so on. But essentially, there are certain steps or certain phases in this process that you need to understand and to be aware in which of these phases you do which tasks. So this means when you're extracting data, we are connecting to our data sources, different data sources, and we select data that we need to load into Microsoft Fabric. During the transformation phase, we apply different data transformation techniques and steps to clean, to conform our data, to combine data coming from different sources, and so on. And finally, we are loading our data into fact and dimension tables. After that, you may want, depending on how your solution is performing, you may want to apply some post-load optimizations, and there are different tuning options. Some of them we are going also to examine in this session today. Data loading process can be two-folded. So it's either full loading, that means every time you load the data, you truncate the table, you remove everything that's in there, and you load the data from scratch. This one is, has its own pros and cons. The main cons are, first, you need longer time to load this data because essentially you're loading the entire data from the source, and there is no history stored. As I said, each and every time when you do the loading process, you truncate, you drop everything that was inside, and then you don't have this historical information. It's good for some initial load, or when you need to do a refresh from scratch, then full loading is the way to go. On the opposite, we have incremental loading, which probably you will use in most of real-life scenarios. In incremental loading, we are basically appending data to a table. So we are appending new data to the existing data that is already there. This usually brings faster updates because instead of loading the entire data set, we just load a smaller chunk of rows. And the good thing is that also history is preserved. By using a timestamp column in your data set, you can define which rows were already loaded, so you don't need to load them again. And then you incrementally load only the records that were inserted into data source after the latest timestamp in your storage location. And it's the most suitable solution for doing frequent updates. When it comes to bringing data into Microsoft Fabric, there are multiple options. And as you will learn, Fabric is all about the options. So one single task can be done in various different ways. And it doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other, but it's good to know about the different options and in which scenarios to use each of them. So Data Flows Gen 2 will be the best friend for all low-code and no-code developers, or some people call them citizen developers. So if you are a pro Power BI user and you are accustomed to using Power Query to perform all your transformations to the data, Data Flows Gen 2 will be your best friend in Microsoft Fabric. So essentially, Data Flows Gen 2 allow you to connect to a bunch of different data sources. So there are more than 100 built-in connectors. And then you can use graphical user interface, same as in Power Query, to transform your data. And then the main difference between the Data Flows Gen 2, this one, and the old data flow that already exists in Power BI world before Fabric was introduced, is that now you have also the option to output the data. So you can set the destination for your data, and you can write result of your transformations into a lakehouse or warehouse or KQL database or Azure SQL database. That's a cool thing about data flows Gen 2. So this is for all of you who ever worked with Power Query or Power Query Online in all the data flows. This is a well-known environment, and yeah, so you will find yourself, as I said, in a good shape and good position to leverage your Power Query skills. Some of the pros and cons. Data flow is mainly considered as a data transformation tool. So when there are different options to ingest the data into Microsoft Fabric, data flows is one of them, and data flows is mainly used for when you have requirements to transform the data. Of course, there are some limitations as of today. First of all, row-level security is not supported. And also this item works only with Fabric. So unlike traditional old data flows that work without Fabric license, don't be confused if you don't have a Fabric license or if you didn't activate your Fabric capacity, then data flows Gen 2 will not be an option for you. Next option for bringing data into Fabric is Notebook. Notebook is completely opposite to data flows Gen 2. So data flows Gen 2, as we said, this is a great solution for low code and no code developers, whereas notebooks, they implement a code first approach. So you need to write some code to bring data into Microsoft Fabric. And notebooks are very cool. Not just because you can write your code in there, but you can also write some comments. So there are also markdown cells which you can use to write comments, kind of documenting what you were doing. And trust me, I like this feature because yeah, after I open a notebook after a month or two, I don't have idea what I did here. So markdown is a great feature. Plus, it allows you to write code in different languages. PySpark is the default one, but you can also use Scala, R, or Spark SQL also to perform all kinds of things within the notebook. They're also fantastic tool because you can automate their execution. So you can schedule notebook to run at a certain point in time. So notebooks are also a great choice, and when it comes to performance, they are probably more performant than data flows Gen 2. Simply, they are leveraging Spark engine in the background, which is a distributed architecture. So essentially, all your workloads can be split across multiple nodes and therefore probably executed faster than when using a single node architecture. So with notebooks, you can connect to external data sources and you can create different file types within OneLake in Microsoft Fabric. Those are some of the examples of code examples, how you can use notebooks to create Parquet file format within OneLake or Delta format in OneLake and so on. And yeah, this is how you write and how you set different properties. For example, you might want to enable or disable vOrder. vOrder is not specifically tested on DP-600, so I will just briefly mention it here just for the sake as I'm mentioning it in the context of notebooks. So vOrder is a specific Microsoft or Fabric specific way of sorting the data in most optimal way when you write data into OneLake, and therefore later all the engines that read data from the Delta table can run their queries faster. So that's vOrder. By default, it's enabled. So whenever you write data into OneLake using any of Fabric engines, so it doesn't matter if it's a notebook, if it's a SQL, or if it's a data flows, whenever you are using any of these engines, by default, they will use vOrder when writing data. So you can, or if you want to disable it, you need to explicitly disable this property. You can also use T-SQL. If you're coming from T-SQL background, there are also different options to bring your data into Microsoft Fabric. The most straightforward one is using copy statement. And then essentially you connect to external Azure storage account, and you can bring your data with copy statement into Fabric. Also, all the features that we know from previous editions of SQL databases that Microsoft created. So creating external tables, create CTAs, so create create table as select, insert select. All of these are supported, and then you can combine data coming from different sources into a warehouse. The next item that is important to understand is called pipeline, or full name is Fabric Pipeline. So pipeline are also part of data factory experience in Microsoft Fabric, and they are used to ingest the data into Fabric. That's the first purpose of pipelines. But the main purpose, I would say, is to orchestrate data loading process. What does this mean? This means that you can use pipeline to simply copy the data as is from your data source into Microsoft Fabric. So there is a copy data activity, which we will examine in a few seconds. But the main purpose of using pipelines is to orchestrate the entire workflow and define what happens after what, which action should be triggered after the previous step is completed, and so on. There are multiple different activities in Fabric Pipeline. We can talk about just about these activities for next hour or so, but most commonly used ones are, as I said, copy data. Then you can also add data flow as an activity to a pipeline, same as the notebook. And also you can refresh your Power BI semantic model. There is an activity called semantic model refresh that you can use. So once the entire process is completed, then you can trigger this semantic model refresh activity, and your Power BI semantic model will be refreshed. Main concepts to understand with pipelines: activities. So there are two main types of activities. First one is for data transformation. For example, that's a notebook, that's a data flow, that's copy data activity, and also control flow. So for each loops and stuff like that. Pipelines can be parameterized, and you can also schedule runs of your pipeline to happen at the certain point in time based on your business requirements. Copy data, as I mentioned, that's the one that is heavily tested in DP-600. So what I encourage you to do is to thoroughly read about copy data activity, because that's the one that has its own sub-skill area tested in DP-600, at least as of today. And with copy data tool, basically you're just connecting using built-in connectors. So similarly as with data flows, although there is a smaller number of built-in connectors with pipelines compared to data flows, and then you simply bring the data as it is into Microsoft Fabric. The main difference, and this is one of the key takeaways from this session, the main difference between the pipeline and data flow Gen 2, because I know that kind of this question will be definitely included in DP-600. The main difference is that if you use a copy data activity, it's just a simple copy of the data from your data source into Fabric. No transformations. And when you want, or when you need to apply transformations to your data while loading it into Microsoft Fabric, then you want to use Dataflow Gen 2. And in addition, Dataflow Gen 2 can be run as a standalone item, but it can also be part of the orchestration process that is executed from a pipeline. Another cool concept that Fabric introduced is called shortcuts. So essentially what shortcuts are doing, the same as we create shortcuts in our Windows operating system. So for example, you have a file that is stored on your D drive somewhere under, I don't know which subfolder. You create a shortcut on a desktop, and then whenever you click on this shortcut, it takes you directly to the original location of the file. So it's just a pointer on your desktop. It's the same with shortcuts in OneLake. So you create a shortcut within a lakehouse, and it's just a pointer to the data that is physically stored somewhere else. And when I say somewhere else, there are two types of shortcuts, to internal data sources and external data sources. Internal data sources are other lake houses within Microsoft Fabric, and they don't necessarily need to be within the same workspace where you are creating shortcuts, so they can also reside in different workspaces. So internal shortcuts are the one that point to location that is already in Fabric. And then there are a bunch of external shortcut sources supported at this moment. ADLS Gen 2, for example, then also Amazon S3, Google Cloud Platform, Dataverse, and more will be probably introduced in the future. But as of today, those are external data sources that are supported for creating shortcuts. And with shortcuts, this story about data mesh approach and having different domains and then using data without physically moving it from one domain to the other. So you have one copy of the data, and then you use shortcuts to create like a virtual representation of this data wherever you need it. Here, this is the list of benefits for using shortcuts. Again, you'll get the presentation, so I don't need to read this for you. But shortcuts is a very cool concept in Microsoft Fabric, as I already said. One of the concepts that you are going to be tested for sure in DP-600 is called medallion architecture. Personally, I don't like too much this name, but since it's already widely adopted and it's like everyone already knows when you say medallion architecture, what is it all about, I'll continue using it. And this concept is also used throughout DP-600. So let's stay with that one, even though I prefer using different names for those three layers. The essential idea behind those bronze, silver, and gold is not the metal itself, but it's different level of quality of the data that you are using for downstream consumption. So bronze is the worst quality. If you compare bronze, silver, and gold, bronze is the level of quality. In bronze layer, you are essentially bringing the data as is from the data source. So it's a raw data. Like you don't do any transformations, no data cleaning, nothing. You just bring the data, and it serves as a repository for archiving the data. Why is that important? Let's say that something happened on my production system. Instead of going again to a data source and loading millions and millions of rows, I have this data already stored in my bronze layer, and then I can reuse it from there to proceed with my process. It contains unvalidated data. So whatever is stored in a data source in whatever form, that's in bronze layer. And yeah, sometimes it should be nice that data is stored in Parquet or Delta, but if not possible, this can also be in any other format like CSV or JSON or whatever. Silver layer assumes implementing certain techniques to clean and conform the data from the bronze layer. So you take the data that you already brought into bronze layer of Fabric, and then you apply different techniques to conform and clean the data. It's great for machine learning workloads, for some ad hoc analysis, but it's still not ready for our business reporting. This one already contains enriched and validated data. That means you clean all the mess from the original data set. You possibly add new columns, whatever you need to enrich this data set, and whatever is needed to validate the data. From a data modeling perspective, usually, again, whatever I say about medallion architecture is just a recommendation or how things are usually done. It's not set in stone. So also the number of layers, the name of layers, it's not set in stone. So it's up to you how do you want to implement it. But usually we are talking about data that is normalized to a third normal form when we talk about silver layer. And in this layer, we already want data that is ready for further consumption downstreams. And then we try to store the data either as Delta, if possible, or eventually as Parquet. And finally, we have the most refined layer, which is called gold layer, where data is additionally structured and organized for specific project requirements. Data is additionally not just cleaned and refined, but also in this layer you should implement business logic and implement specific calculations that are needed by specific group of users that will consume the data from a gold layer. In this layer, again, usually we are talking about the Kimball style star schema. So we are preparing our data for Power BI reports downstream, and we all know that star schema is the preferred way for modeling data for Power BI reports. So in gold layer, we already build this Kimball style star schema model. Again, delta should be your default choice in gold layer. How do you organize data how do you organize your Fabric Lakehouse? It depends. It depends on those questions that you need to address before you decide how you want to organize the data in a lakehouse. First of all, how much data are you working with? It's not the same if you're working with 500 megabytes of data versus 2 petabytes. So it depends on the amount of data. How complex are the transformations you need to make? That's also important. How often you need to move the data between the layers? Is it once per day, or is it every 30 minutes? Based on that, you may want to decide and make different choices. And finally, last but definitely not the least, what tools are you most comfortable with? I'll give you an example. I don't know Python, so I come from SQL background. So whatever I'm doing with T-SQL. And that means that if I don't need to use Python, I won't use it. And what tools are you most comfortable with which will probably define to which features or to which components of Microsoft Fabric you want to leverage during the process of organizing the data. Point to remember, data flows transform data, pipelines orchestrate data, notebooks can do both. So notebooks are the more versatile solution in Fabric. How you implement the medallion architecture specifically in Fabric. So previously I was talking about medallion architecture in general, but specifically in Fabric, remember for bronze layer, we are ingesting raw data. So we can use pipelines, we can use data flows, we can use notebooks, whatever plays to our strength. For silver, when we clean and validate data, we can use data flows or notebooks, or you can also use T-SQL, depending if you choose to introduce also warehouses in the scope. And finally, for gold layer, when we do additional transformations and modeling, we can use SQL Analytics endpoint of a lakehouse or semantic model, Power BI semantic model that's built on top of gold layer. Some of the fundamental concepts that you need to learn for taking DP-600 exam. First one is related to dimensional modeling. And I sincerely hope that, no offense, but if you plan to take DP-600, I assume you are already familiar with dimensional modeling fundamentals. So I won't talk about what is the difference between fact table and dimension table, which fields should go into one versus another. Definitely you need to learn that and know that. These are some of the concepts that are included in DP-600. So concept of both fact and dimension tables and concept of keys. So it's important to understand what is the difference between surrogate keys and alternate keys or business keys or natural keys, how they're also called. So it's important to know that if you want to take DP-600 exam. Some other considerations when it comes to dimensional modeling, knowing what is a snowflake schema. I apologize, this is not further denormalized, this is normalized. Should say here star schema, but further normalized. So I apologize here, this D should be deleted. And when you create a more granular dimension. So snowflake schema, also something that you need to understand, and what is the difference compared to star schema. Other other topics that are relevant for dimensional modeling. First, how to work with calendar dimension, and another one which is even more important, slowly changing dimension. Again, this is a concept that is not exclusively related to Microsoft Fabric or Power BI. This is a general dimensional modeling concept, and this slowly changing dimension defines how you handle changes to the attributes in your dimensions. So here the emphasis is not on the speed. So it doesn't matter if you change attributes every day or every year. It's the focus is on change. So attributes might change, and how you handle those changes is defined through your slowly changing dimension strategy. There are 6 different, or 7, now I forgot how many slowly changing dimension types, but we usually use 3 of them, 0, 1, and 2. 0 means there are no changes to your attributes at all. Number 1 means you simply overwrite the existing record with the new value. And the third one, slowly changing dimension type 2, which is most commonly used in analytical scenarios. It will most commonly be used also in Fabric. So slowly changing dimension type 2 means that whenever there is a change to the attribute, we add a new row and we just set the value for validity of that record. We change the validity for the previous one. It was valid from point X in time to point Y in time, and then the new one is valid from point Y in time until somewhere in the future. Maybe it will not change anymore, but basically we are adding a new row to the table to define the validity of the record. And this one is used because then you can do point in time analysis. You can check how things were changing over time, and usual examples are customer address or product price. So those are the things, those are the attributes that are changing in our dimension tables. Some other concepts and features to learn in this part when it comes to preparing and serving the data: bridge tables, denormalization, merging and joining, how it's done in Power Query. So what are different types of joins, and what are the results of these joins? How to apply different data cleansing techniques, so different transformations in Power Query, splitting columns, also replacing values, and so on and so on. So those are things that you also need to learn. Unfortunately, we have just 1 hour, so I can't talk about each of those concepts in more depth, but please make sure to take this list and go through each and every bullet point. When it comes to performance optimization, you will be tested on different tools and features that enables you to identify bottlenecks in your processes, and also not just to identify bottlenecks, but also to resolve some common performance issues. Think of query folding, think of problems with SQL queries, and so on. Now the next big topic is related to Power BI. So if you are Power BI professional, you will feel at home in this one. It's called Implement and Manage Semantic Models. So first of all, there is a new player in Power BI world that Fabric introduced, and it's called Direct Lake. So short overview about Direct Lake and why I consider it as a revolutionary feature. Some of the prerequisites, and this is important to know because when you do case studies on DP-600, you will probably get a question that requires from you to understand what are the prerequisites for using Direct Lake storage mode. So first of all, you need either F capacity or Power BI premium capacity. So either F or P SKU. Premium per user does not work. You need Lakehouse with SQL endpoint or Warehouse. So Direct Lake is supported for both Lakehouse and Warehouse. Data must be in Delta format. So if you store the data in one lake in any other format, like Parquet or CSV, Direct Lake will not work. And V-ordering that I mentioned previously. So V-ordering is not a hard requirement, meaning it will, if you're not using V-ordering for your Delta tables, this will not prevent Direct Lake from working. But in that case, you can expect performance degradation. So V-order is just this additional X factor or additional ingredient that makes Power BI reports running faster. So a brief overview of the architecture and where Direct Lake can fit into your architecture when you're building it in Fabric. Before Fabric, we had two main storage modes. Import mode, which essentially creates a copy of the data from the data source and stores this copy in the local database of Power BI, and that database is called VertiPack. And basically, data is stored in memory, in cache memory. So these tables here on the left-hand side, they're simply loaded into local Power BI's database. And all queries from Power BI reports are just targeting this local database. So Desc queries are not going directly to your data source. They're just querying copy of the data, this data snapshot from VertiPack database. And because the data is stored in memory, the main benefit of using import mode is super fast performance. So data is in memory, it's in columnar storage, meaning if you did your homework with data model properly, even if when you're working with millions of data, millions of rows, your queries should run very fast. But there are two downsides of using import mode. First one is data duplication. As I already mentioned, essentially we are just taking the data and moving it to another place, or not moving it, we are copying it to another place. So we have two identical copies, so two physical copies of the same data in two places. One it's in original data source, the other one is in Power BI's database. That's one thing. Another thing is data latency, because when we connect to a data source and we load the data into Power BI, we are creating a snapshot at a certain point in time. And then, because DAX queries will always query this copy of the data, to be able to have the latest data available in our Power BI reports, we need to refresh this snapshot here in this cube in Power BI's database. And this introduces latency because we can't refresh the data every minute or every 2 minutes. Let's say we are doing it every hour, so our data latency can possibly be up to 1 hour. And to resolve these downsides of import mode, Microsoft introduced another storage mode, which is called Direct Query, that works completely the opposite. And it resolves all of these downsides. So in this case, your DAX queries are automatically translated to SQL language. And at the query time, these DAX queries retrieve the latest data from your data source and bring them to Power BI report. That's amazing because whatever you have stored in your data source at the query time, this will be displayed in Power BI report. That's great. There is no data duplication. Data is simply stored in your data source, and Power BI just keeps the metadata, so information about the tables, columns, data types, and so on. So that's great. But why then we are not using Direct Query as a default choice? Because of performance. The answer is simple, and performance is significantly worse than with import mode. And before I show you how Direct Lake here tries to overcome the limitations and exploit the benefits of both these storage modes, it's important to keep in mind that these two are still available. So these two options, import and Direct Query, they still exist, and you should still continue to use them. So it's not that now with Fabric it's everything in Direct Lake. No, on the contrary. So your import and Direct Query storage mode is absolutely relevant. So Direct Lake tries, as I said, to combine the best features from both worlds. In this case, data is still stored same as in Direct Query. The data is stored in its original data source. So Power BI doesn't load any data into the model. So the model is initially empty. It just stores the metadata, same as with Direct Query. And then once the query is executed from Power BI report, since the data in one lake in Delta format is stored very similar to the way how data is stored in VertiPack database, in Power BI's database, Power BI can quickly transcode this data, translate basically this data, and load it into a memory. And once the data is loaded into a memory, it's technically the same as import mode. So it combines performance which is close or very close to import mode and no data latency and no data duplication of direct query. But there are certain limitations, obviously, and I will list some of most important limitations, and especially those limitations that you might experience in DP-600 when it comes to case studies, which storage mode to choose, and so on. So some of these limitations are here to help you decide if you can or cannot use direct lake mode. But as I said, always check the list of current limitations on official Microsoft Learn page, because things are changing in Fabric. Things are rapidly changing, so it may happen that some of these limitations that are listed here are not relevant in, who knows, few days, maybe few weeks. We'll see. Okay, a short overview of two external tools that are included as part of DP-600 in the next 2 weeks. After 15th of November, no more external tools in DP-600. But as I said, since we are talking about the current version, I need to tell you a few sentences about those two external tools. And those are mainstream external tools that all of you who work with Power BI, I suppose you at least heard about them, and I sincerely hope that you're using them in best case scenario on a daily basis. So first one is Desc Studio, which is used to write Desc code. Of course, we can do that now with Desc Query View in Power BI Desktop, but still Desc Studio is, for many Power BI professionals, preferred option for writing Desc code. For performance tuning, troubleshooting, poorly performing DAX queries, we still can't do that from Power BI Desktop, so we need additional tool to measure this, the performance of each individual query, and to see the query plan especially. So in Power BI Desktop, you can't see query plan anywhere. In Desc Studio, you can see query plan and understand performance of the specific DAX query. Another external tool is Tabular Editor. This one, so Tabular Editor 2, just to be clear, there are two versions of Tabular Editor. You will be tested on Tabular Editor 2, which is a free version of this tool. And this one is mainly used, so it's also very versatile tool that can be used for various tasks. But most commonly, you're using Tabular Editor to manipulate tabular object model, so change different properties on the model itself. And there are certain features that you can't implement using Power BI Desktop. Two most common ones are custom KPIs and object level, especially object level security. So this is still not available from Power BI Desktop, and you have to use Tabular Editor. I'll briefly touch upon some of the concepts and features that are included in DP-600 without going deep into details. So composite models, this one allows you to combine data coming from different source groups, import versus direct query. Remember, one of the limitations of direct lake is there are no composite models. So if you choose to combine import and direct query, you can't include some tables in direct lake. That's not possible. But you can combine basically various data sources that are from direct query and tables that are in import storage mode. Some of the best practices are whatever you learned about direct query best practices essentially also applies to composite models. Another feature that is cool and that is used in synergy with composite models is called aggregations. There are two types, user-defined and automatic. Automatic aggregations are not part of the exam, so we are talking just about user-defined aggregations. And the main motive for using this feature is to reduce the amount of data that query needs to scan. In Power BI, you need to make Power BI aware of aggregated tables. So there is an option once you load the data into Power BI. The main prerequisite for aggregations to work is that your detail table, the main table, fact table, detail table, should be in direct query storage mode. If it's import mode, then you don't see the option to implement aggregation. So the main table must be in direct query storage mode. And their recommended way of doing things is to set your aggregated tables to import mode, so you get the best possible performance, and set your dim tables storage mode to dual. The reason is simple. If you don't set them to dual, you will face the problem of limited relationships. So this can easily be a question on DP-600, how to set the proper storage mode for your tables in composite model that uses aggregations, and then that's why this slide is important. Role level security and object level security, two more topics that are tested for implementing and managing semantic models. Role level security essentially allows you to restrict the access to specific attributes. Think of country, product category, product color, whatever is the attribute. With role level security, you can restrict the access to certain attributes, certain values of this attribute. So there are two types of role level security, static and dynamic. Static is defined within PBIX file, and it's very good for basic scenarios. It's fairly easy and straightforward to configure it, but it requires a lot of maintenance, a lot of manual work, and since it's defined on a PBIX file level, it's not reusable across multiple models. On the other side, dynamic allows you to control access on a more granular level. That's a great thing. Essentially, you are introducing a new table that you use to control the access through the data model. It's reusable because then you can reuse this table across any model, any semantic model in Power BI, and requires less maintenance because you do all the things at one central place. But the downside is that it adds to model complexity. Some of the considerations, again, please be aware of what happens if you add one user to multiple roles. Also, role level security definitely has a performance impact. Depending on how complex are your role level security rules, it may happen that really significantly impacts the performance. Object level security is a completely opposite concept to role level security in terms that we are restricting access to certain objects in a model. This object can be entire table, it can be just a column, and consequentially, if you restrict the access to a certain column, then all the pending measures will also be inaccessible to the user who has restricted access to this one. Unlike with role level security, where basically those properties, those attributes are just hidden in the Power BI report, but they exist. They are still part of the model. With object level security, essentially they are completely obscured from the model, and then you might face some bad user experience with broken visuals in the report and so on. But the difference between role level security and object level security, role level security restrict access to attributes, object level security restricts access to columns and tables. This is also a very broad skill area. So DEX, I already mentioned you need to know DEX. So some of the concepts in DEX that you need to know, variables, iterator functions, window functions, information functions, and so on. Then general Power BI stuff, so things like calculation groups, dynamic format strings, field parameters, and many more. And when it comes to performance tuning, how to implement incremental refresh from Power BI service. So it will not test you how to implement incremental refresh with tabular editor, but with built-in a feature that is part of Power BI, and also how to leverage those two external tools that I mentioned to improve the performance. One last skill area that we are going to cover is explore and analyze data. I already mentioned this one will be incorporated into prepare data now as of 15th of November, but similar set of skills will be included in that part. First, PySpark. How do you perform exploratory analytics with PySpark? Describe method when you create a data frame object. A data frame is a special object that we use to create to store the data within PySpark. When you create a data frame object, you can use describe method on top of this data frame object to understand what's inside. And this describe method will return the following 5 values: count, mean, standard deviation, minimum, and maximum. This can also be easily in some form of question in DP-600. So describe is one of the key methods that you need to know, and also how to group and aggregate data using PySpark. There are two main functions, group by and ENG. So this is a typical example of how you group and aggregate data within the data frame. The DF is abbreviation for a data frame, nothing else. So grouping by, in this example, I'm grouping my data by gender, and then I'm doing two different types of aggregations. I'm calculating the average value of age and sum of salary column from data frame. With Power Query, exploratory analytics is done through the built-in data profiling features. There are 3 of them. And again, this one will be 100% including DP-600. So make sure to learn which of these features can help you leverage which part of data profiling operations. So column quality gives you an overview about the percentage of valid, empty, and error records in the column. Column distribution shows you how many distinct and unique values you have in your column. And it is displayed on the top of the column. So this part here, number 5. And column profile is the most comprehensive. It gives you here, if you take a look at the bottom, so it gives you an overview about the column statistics. So minimum value, maximum value, average, mean, depending on the column type, it gives you a whole range of different information and how the values are distributed within the column. So please make sure to understand which options each of these features can help you with. With SQL, you can query data, of course. From the perspective of DP-600, obviously you will not be tested on some basic SQL stuff and so on, but there are few groups of functions that are specifically relevant for DP-600. So we are going to talk about these 3 groups. First one is window functions. So window function, looking through the window. So you define a set of rows and then you perform your calculations over this set of rows. There are 3 main parts of each window function. First one is overclose. Overclose defines the window. So this subset of rows where you want to perform your calculations on. Then partition by, depending how you want to structure your windows, those subsets of data, partition by can be used or not, and it breaks rows into smaller subsets. And finally, order by, depending which window function you're using, sometimes it's mandatory, sometimes it's not, but those are 3 key components of window functions in SQL. The second group is ranking functions. So there are 3 ranking functions that you need to learn and understand. And you will 100% get the question that asks you to define which function was used to produce a certain result set. So 3 SQL ranking functions are row number, rank, and dense rank. Please use these slides and make sure to understand what is the difference. Okay, row number is very simple. It just assigns the next number in the sequence starting from 1. It doesn't take into account any information such as if the data was created on the same date or so on. But what I wanted to show you here is here for row number and rank. Let's go here. For rank and dense rank, the difference, they behave the same in this part here. Okay, so they behave the same. They treat, because I partition my data based on a customer ID. So for my customer ID 11330, I have 2 transactions on 24th of October. They will get the same number both within rank and dense rank. But the difference is what happens after that, the next number in the sequence. With rank, it skips the next value. With dense rank, there are no gaps in the values. So after 6, nevertheless, that I have twice number 6, the next value is number 7. That's dense rank. So that's the difference. That's a subtle difference, and you need to know that for DP-600. Okay, let's go to the third group. Those are offset functions. So again, there are 4 of them: lag, lead, and first value, last value. First value, last value, you can assume that the difference between these two. And lag and lead, so lag will return the next value within the window. If I zoom it a little bit, let me show you. So again, I'm partitioning data per customer. So lag will return the next the previous value, sorry, the previous value from the previous cell, whereas lead will return the opposite. It will return the next value in the cell. First value and last value just return the first value from the window, and last value returns the last value from the window. Other concepts and features to learn, or that are good to know for taking when taking DP-600. First, prescriptive and predictive analytics. Understand the difference between these two, at least from a high-level perspective. Knowledge of classic T-SQL would obviously help if you need to, if you get those questions when you need to order the statements within order the commands within the SQL statement. That helps. And also how to query your Power BI models through XML endpoint, for example, using Desc Studio. What's coming after November 15? So everything that I've shown you in the previous part of the session is relevant until November 15. After that, there are some structural changes to the exam that you need to be aware of if you plan to take the exam after this date. Some of the key changes. First, now streaming data is part of the exam. So remember when I told you at the beginning, and I included this red cross over real-time analytics. This is not the case anymore. So now real-time analytics is part of the DP-600 exam, or will be part in 2 weeks. So you need to learn things like Event House, which is a KQL database, and some KQL basics in terms of how to query the data with KQL. You need to learn this stuff. There is no more PySpark. So after November 15, you will not be tested on using notebooks, writing PySpark code, and so on. Which is good or bad, depends what is your background. So PySpark is now moved to DP-700, which is the latest Microsoft data platform exam for Fabric data engineers. So this one is for analytics engineers. DP-700 is for data engineers. And PySpark is now part of DP-700. As I mentioned, explore and analyze data part is now included into prepare data. And now maintain a data analytics solution importance increased. So previously it was 10 to 15%. Now it's 20 to 25. So things like Git integration, setting workspace level permissions, item level permissions, endorsing items, and so on. This is now part of maintain a data analytics solution. So to conclude, no PySpark, but there will be KQL. Now, is it easier to pass or not? It depends. It depends on your skills and knowledge. If you know KQL and you don't know PySpark, for you, obviously, it will be easier. For those folks who work with PySpark, for them, it will probably be harder. But yeah, that's a trade-off. Some of the learning resources that I want to share with you, I have three blogs that you should follow. And I shamelessly promote mine. Sorry about that. So data-motor.com. I've blogged a lot about DP-600 topics. Also, my fellow MVPs, Andy Cutler and Kevin Chant. Andy is blogging at serverlesssql.com, kevinrchant.com. And also, if you prefer learning from videos, Will Needham, Learn Microsoft Fabric YouTube channel is amazing, full of great resources, learning resources for DP-600. So make sure to check any of those resources. Those are community created resources. Obviously, you have a full learning path on Microsoft Learn. And if you prefer to get ready for the exam that way, that's also absolutely fine. And with that being said, I'm sorry for going over time, but there was a lot of things to cover. So I'm open to hear your questions. As far as I see, there is nothing at the moment in the chat window, but yeah.
No questions at the moment.
So we killed people.
That's okay. But one additional info. If you use RLS, CLS, or DDM in warehouse, the direct link is fallback to directory.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Thank you
But
very
it's
much,
not-
Nicola.
Yes, thank you. That's
No problem. Thanks from my side. Yeah, for everyone who joined, thanks for joining. And if you have any questions after the session, reach out offline, and I'll be happy to try to answer. And thanks, Catherine and Marisol, for having me.
I just wanted to add one thing. Sorry, my camera for some reason stopped working, but I just wanted to add one thing. I wish I would have watched this session before I took the exam, to be honest, because this was so much valuable information in like such a short period of time. So thanks very much, and I hope that all the people that are going to take the exam in the next 2 weeks are well prepared, and I'm sure that if they watch the session or like have a look at your blog, they will. Yeah.
Thank you. Hope this helps. Thank you.
Thank you, and for the rest, have a nice evening and a nice Halloween or other holiday.
Yes.
So stay tuned to the next female fabricator session, which will be in 2 weeks, I guess, Marisol.
Yes, we will announce it on time.
Yes,
Still on it.
right. Okay, then. Thank you, and we see us in 2 weeks.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great evening. Bye.